Hello, guys. Hey, I had some questions about the Founder Dojo program and the Founder Transformation program. As you may know, we have open enrollment right now for Founder Transformation, and this is for people that are working typically in tech, but they don't have to be in tech. They're working a full time job, but they feel unsatisfied with their 9 to 5, and they have an idea to build a startup. Maybe they've started working on it, maybe they haven't. But the Founder Transformation Program helps them through that transition. So we're excited about it, but we had a question that came up about the ROI. And so I wanted to take that question head on, which I'm going to do right now. Okay, so let's do a startup ROI analysis. So there's a couple things we need to consider. When you work on a startup, and quit your job, there's an opportunity cost in terms of lost salary, right? If you're working on a startup, you're not getting paid at your job anymore. In addition, there's also an investment that people typically make to build out the product and other things that they need for the business. And then we charge a fee for our program, so I've got that in there just to be comprehensive. And then you hope to generate either a profitable startup or maybe your goal is to sell the company and create an exit. So we're going to look at average exit value. And then we should look at the probability of that because the probability that a startup will be successful is actually really low. In fact, let me switch to that quickly here. Oh, I've given away the numbers, so we'll have to come back to that later. This is some data from Y Combinator. It looks at their funnel. This was a particular data set from an article that I'm quoting down below, but in a universe of 10,000 applications, they select 511 teams, or about 5%. Of those, only 37 exited with an exit of 40 million or more, so that's 7.2%. And so their overall applications to success rate is 0.4%. That's pretty low, right? I mean, 99.6% failure rate. So let's take that into account as well. So looking at all of that, we can look at what happens without Founder Dojo. Let's say you do this startup on your own without any guidance from us. And let's say you're making $150,000 a year, and let's say on average you work on your startup for 2 years. Now, your numbers may differ. Your salary might be higher or lower. The duration that you work on your startup might be higher or lower. I've seen people work on their startup for 6 months and then they just quit. I've seen other people work on their startup for 10 years or more and it still didn't work for them, but they're just being very, very persistent. And then in the scenario where you're not taking our program, you wouldn't have a cost, obviously. And then I'm taking the $40 million exit value. That is an average exit value from Techstars, the companies that go through Techstars. And Techstars is a leading startup accelerator, so we'll call that 40 million. And then if I take the 0.4% number from the YC example, then I can multiply the 0.4% by 40 million and get an expected value of 160,000. So this startup adventure generated or has an expected value of 160,000. And then if you subtract the costs, then you're negative, right? You lost money. And you would have been better off sticking with your job financially, right? Maybe not emotionally, but definitely financially. So this is when people say startups are hard, this is what they're talking about. The failure rate's extremely high. Some people think it's, irrational to do this. I disagree with both of those statements. I think startups are actually easy if you know what you're doing. And one of the most rewarding experiences you can have. But that's just my opinion. Okay, so let's look at what this looks like if you sign up for the Founder Transformation Program. So all the numbers are pretty much the same. The third line down, you're going to have the cost. We charge $8,500 for the 6-month program. And there's more details about what that includes if you're interested. But I guess the fifth line down is where you see the big difference. In our cohort group, the pilot cohort, we had an 83% success rate. And I would call that a long-term success rate because we looked at the outcomes 12 years after these founders went through the program. So this was really long-term. And that's because our thesis is that our program fundamentally transforms people into entrepreneurs, and it sometimes takes a long time for that to play out. You might start a startup that fails, you start again, and that one's successful. There's lots of twists and turns that happen when you go on this journey. But I was actually quite shocked that the number was that high. I wasn't expecting it to be that high. But to me, this was validation that our thesis is correct, that if you take entrepreneurs that have heart and you teach them the skills that they need, then they can dramatically improve their success rate. I mean, in this case, we're talking about 207x improvement in success rate. So it's pretty significant. So anyway, sticking with this with Founder Dojo scenario, if you take the 83% times 40 million, you get about 33 million. That's the expected value. And then if you look at the return, which is the expected value minus all the costs are really pretty insignificant at this point. Your total return is 32.8 million. So if you compare the 32.8 million times the negative 215,000, you get an increase of 153. So one way to say this is if you take or sign up and participate in the Founder Transformation Program, you have 153 times higher financial return in your startup. So these numbers are crazy, but they're actually based on real data. And this is why we're so excited to tell everybody about this program. So if you're interested, go to founderdojo.com/validate and check it out. You can sign up for a free training video, and that'll get you on our email list. And if you have questions, you can ask questions of me. My email is dave@founderdojo.com, and hope to see you soon. Thanks so much.